All right, so next up we have Mr. Hope. For this one, I'm not going to make a chart. You can Google Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mr. Hope, and it'll come up right like the first thing on Google Images, so you can follow along with me. At this point, I'm going to go a little quicker. So hopefully you've watched at least the overview and some of the other videos to get the idea behind how these songs are working. So I'm going to start skipping over stuff a little bit quicker and assume people are with me at this point. So this song, we're going to think of it two ways. We're going to think of it around the key of E major, but then we're going to think of it also resolving to the 5, which is the Mixolydian sound of the B, like a B dominant sound. So even though it's in the key of E major, there are going to be times where the B is going to be kind of, the 5 is going to be kind of tonicized, even though it's a Mixolydian sound. So that first progression, D major 7 to, as a D major 7 to E major 7 to F sharp 7 sus 4. Okay, so like we talked about in the first video, that theme, pretty similar. So there's that theme again. I like to think of this though as a little bit incomplete. If you look at the first ending of the A section, you'll see a C major 7 chord. I like to think this progression actually starts there. So if we're dealing with E major right now, the C major 7 would be like a flat 6. Then the D major 7 would be like a flat 7 major 7, and then to the 1. That's something you see pretty common. Like you'll see that. I feel like that's like kind of almost like a Broadway thing, right? Like it has a very big sound. So you can think of it like that too. But at its simplest form, you're moving parallel major 7 chords and kind of heavily around the key of E. But again, we're going to be going to B dominant and heavily resolving there. So even if you listen to the solos, despite this being kind of in the key of E, it's going to be heavily soloing around B resolutions because that's where everything's going basically. So then we have an F sharp 7 sus. That's sort of like a 2 dominant, and that sets up a sidestep 2/5, which is the G7 sus going to the C7 sus to the 1. Now we're thinking of this Mixolydian sound. The A over B is the 1. For clarity, the G7 sus, you can think of that kind of like a G minor 7, and you can think of the C7 sus as a C7. C7 is the same as F sharp 7, as we know from tritone sub relationships. And if I'm losing you, again, feel free to shoot me an email and we can set up a Skype lesson to go over this in depth, but I'm trying to get to some of the more advanced things within this, but I'd be happy to take the time and go over it more in depth with you if that is the case. So, okay, from the F sharp 7, we definitely have a sound, a 5 sound, like it's going somewhere, or even if you just want to say it's sus so it's ambiguous, it kind of is a very good transition chord. And then I look at that G7, even though it's a G7, it's kind of like a G minor 7 or a G7 to C7 going to B. So another sidestep 2/5. The A over the B is definitely giving the B a certain weight there. Okay, then we have this A7 sharp 11 here. So that's an interesting change. So the way I kind of think about that, you could think about it a few different ways. I think the way I like to think about it is, let's take a standard like Days of Wine and Roses. It starts in F major 7, and then it goes to an E flat 9 sharp 11, which is like a flat 7 sharp 11 chord. Pretty much the same thing. We've heavily tonicized the B at this point, and even though it's Mixolydian, we definitely have a big resolution to that B, so we're kind of doing that same expression. You could also add like a E minor 9, you know, and resolve it to the B. So that would be another way of looking at it. You could also think of the A7 and its tritone sub. You could think of an E flat 7 because right after that, we're going to a D major chord. So you could think of that as a walk down. The C minor, I'm going to skip over for a second because I'm going to get back to that in a minute. Then we have a D major 7 going to the relative minor, which is C sharp minor 7. So that's a flat 2 major 7, pretty common movement. Yeah, so, oh, and then we have A minor 7, the minor 4 of the key, going to the C sharp, or the C major 7, because C major 7 is the upper extension of an A minor 7. So that's how that first section is working. It's a lot to unpack, but I'm going to go over it again just to be clear about it. So we're starting this progression, we're thinking about it starting like it's starting from the C major 7, doing our big to the 1. Then we have this F sharp 7 sus4 as the transition chord, sidestep tritone sub 2/5 going to the B. Really, we're playing A over B there. Days of Wine and Roses kind of progression. You could also think about this here as an E flat 7, because you'll notice we have a C minor chord coming up there. That could be as simple as, well, we're going to C sharp minor, so we're going to approach it with a C minor before it, and enclose it with the D major 7, you know. Could be as simple as that. Could be more advanced. You could say that C minor is actually shared in the diminished family with the A7 sharp 11 that precedes it. So again, looking at A7 sharp 11 like an E flat 7, you could look at that C minor comes right out of the same diminished scale that E flat 7 comes out, that triad. So you could play E flat 7 and go right on top of it. So it's sort of like a really cool way of expressing the E flat 7. So if you take the C minor 7 and change it in your mind to an E flat 7, this progression becomes E flat 7, D major 7, C sharp minor 7. Kind of easier to think of it like that too. And that pretty much sums up the A section. We have the climbing triplets at the end. We're dealing with minor third intervals there, and then as it climbs higher into the second bar, the intervals go from minor thirds to major thirds. That's a pretty cool technique because it gives more space and it does feel like you're climbing up somewhere as you're listening to it. That goes to the F minor 11, right? Then to the D flat minor 6. Okay, so this is tricky, but really your resolution point here, you can think about this like it's in the key of E flat major now. So yeah, the F minor 11 here is really a 2. It's a 2 chord. Then we see a D flat minor 6. Think of that. Remember we talked about in the last video how sometimes he'll play like a 2/5 and then he'll leave out the 2 or the 5. Well, this is like a 2/5 D flat minor 6, leaving out the G flat 7. So really all that is a F minor 11 with a C7 after it, instead of, D flat minor 6 and the C7 have the same function. After that, the E flat over E, that's a 1 diminished, or actually it's a sharp 1 diminished, so it would be like going back to the F minor 7, right, because we're in the key of E flat. We're back at F minor 7, the 2, B flat 7, there's our flat 6 major 7 again, like we talked about before. And then the cool thing here is, instead of going up to the 1, he walks down the bottom structure. So like if you look at that walk up, the next thing would be D flat, like from, I'm talking about the B major 7 chord here. I'm talking about doing that thing we did in the intro, but now resolving it to E flat instead of E. So if you think about it like that, D flat major 7 and the B flat minor are the same thing, but they go in the opposite direction. Just like the A flat minor 7 has a relationship with the original key, so it kind of sets us back in a E sound right there. So instead of going, it kind of walks us back down the opposite direction. That's a pretty cool movement there. You could also think of this as like a minor 4 too. So it's a common chord between the key of E major and the key of E flat, where we are now and where we were before. There's our C minor 7 chord again. This time though, I'm gonna say the C minor 7 chord is more functioning, doing that thing where we leave out the 5. So if you put a C minor 7 and then you put like an F7 right after it, you'll see it's C minor 7, F7, C sharp minor 7, F sharp 7. And then going to the top of the form. I think that's really what it is, because the C sharp minor 7 and the F sharp 7 lead us to the key of B. So that pretty much sums up everything for Mr. Hope. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact me.